"Does anyone here know how to shoot?" Staff Sergeant Cole Dolan's voice broke across the 500-yard line like a round going down range, and not one of the 8 Marines on the firing line answered him. They couldn't. Their targets were clean, 40 rounds fired between them and barely a hole in the black, every shot sailing wide into the dirt berm while the range flags snapped and lied and snapped again. "You!" Dolan said, jabbing a finger at a kid with sweat-cutting tracks through the dust on his face, a kid whose name tape read Prut. "You qualified. You wear the same uniform I do." So somebody explain to me why 8 Marines can't put steel on a target that's sitting perfectly still, 500 yards out, on a clear afternoon. Pruitt opened his mouth and closed it again. He had no answer. None of them did, because not one of them was reading the wind. And on that path behind them, an old man with a stack of cafeteria trays had just stopped walking. If you've ever watched a room quietly decide an old man has nothing left to teach it, type steady in the comments, and stay with me, because this is the kind of story that earns the word. He was 77 years old, thin through the shoulders, a white apron still tied at his waist, and a folded paper cap riding in his back pocket. Every Marine on that base knew him by sight, and almost none of them knew his name. He was the old man who worked the line in the mess hall, who had been ladling gravy and cracking eggs onto steel trays longer than most of their drill instructors had been alive. Earl, the kitchen staff called him, Mr. Earl. He came in before the sun, he left after the dinner rush, and in between he fed 2,000 Marines a day and never once raised his voice to any of them. He had a way of moving through the chow hall like a man who had learned, somewhere a long time ago, that the quietest person in the room is usually the one who's seen the most. The young Marines took their trays from his hands and never wondered what those hands had done before they learned to hold a ladle. Why would they? He was just the cook. But Earl had heard the name Pruitt, and the name had stopped him cold. It wasn't the yelling that did it. He had stopped flinching at yelling more than half a century ago. It was that one word, spoken into the wind, and the way it landed in his chest like a hand laid flat against his sternum. He stood on the gravel path with the trays balanced against his hip, and he looked at those 8 young Marines failing in the heat, and something in his face went very still and very far away. Then he set the trays down on the end of the bench. Slowly, carefully, the way a man sets down something he has carried a very long way, and he walked toward the line. Dolan saw him coming, and his whole body tightened. "Sir, this is a live range. I need you back behind the firing line." He wasn't a cruel man. Cole Dolan. He was a good instructor, having a bad afternoon. The kind of NCO who took it personally when his Marines couldn't shoot, because in his mind, their failure was his. He just didn't have room in that moment for an old man in an apron. "Sir, I'm serious. You can't be up here. I know where the line is," Earl said. Quiet. Not unkind. His eyes were already moving, out past the targets, across the shimmer of heat rising off the grass, up to the flags, and back down to the way the tall weeds near the berm were laying over. "You asked if anybody here knows how to shoot." He nodded at the rack. "Mind if I borrow a rifle?" One of the young Marines laughed. Not mean, just the nervous bark of a kid watching something go off the rails. Dolan didn't laugh. "With respect, I don't have time for." "It'll take 1 round," Earl said. There is a particular kind of silence that falls when a man says something that simple, and means it completely. Dolan felt it. He looked at the old cook, at the apron, at the steady hands, and some instinct older than his irritation made him step aside. He handed over the rifle the way you hand a stranger your car keys, half expecting to regret it. Earl took it, and the moment his hands closed around it, everything about him changed. The apron was still there, the paper cap was still in his pocket, but the man holding that rifle was not a cook anymore. He checked the chamber without looking at it. He found the wind with his face, turned his cheek into it, read the flags, read the mirage boiling off the grass in long, flat ribbons, that meant a full value crosswind from the right. He didn't get into a textbook prone. He folded down into the dirt like the ground had been waiting for him, settled his cheek to the stock, and went so quiet and so still that for 3 full seconds the only thing moving on that line was the wind. Then the rifle spoke once. 500 yards downrange, the spotoscope showed a single hole, dead center of the black. Nobody said anything. Nobody breathed. Earl worked the bolt, came up off the rifle, and looked at the 8 stunned faces around him without a trace of triumph in his own. "Your rounds aren't going wide because you can't shoot," he said. "They're going wide because nobody taught you to talk to the wind. So let's talk to it." And then the old cook in the apron began to teach a Marine sniper school's worth of wind doping hold by hold, right there on the line. First thing, you read it before you ever touch the trigger. Flags tell you direction, and they lie about speed. Mirage tells you the truth. See that shimmer running flat across the grass? Left to right, that's your crosswind. If it was boiling straight up, that'd be a head or tail wind, and that you can almost ignore. But flat like that, that's the wind that steals your round. He pointed downrange without looking away from their faces. Now you put it on a clock. Wind in your face is 12. Behind you is 6. The wind hitting you square from 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, that's full value. That's the worst. That's what you've got right now from your right. Wind from the corners, you're 1, 2, 4, 5. Cut it in half. Half value. 12 and 6, no value at all. He let that settle. You're all holding dead center and praying. You don't pray a round onto a target. You math it there. He picked up a handful of dirt and let it fall, watching the drift. Here's the formula they taught us. And it still works, because physics doesn't retire. Take your range in hundreds of yards. 5. Multiply by your wind speed in miles an hour. Call this 10. That's 50. Now divide by your constant. For this rifle, this load, at these ranges, your constant's 15. 50 divided by 15 is a hair over 3. 3 minutes of angle. So you don't hold center. You hold 3 minutes into the wind. Into it, never with it, and you let the wind walk your round home. He looked at Pruitt. Now you, dial 3, right, hold center, send it slow. The kid did exactly what the old man said. The rifle cracked, and 500 yards away, for the first time all day, a round punched into the black. Pruitt came up off that rifle with his eyes wide and his mouth open, and Earl just nodded once, the smallest nod in the world. One by one the rest of them tried it. One by one the holes climbed up out of the dirt and into the target. Staff Sergeant Dolan stood a half step back from all of it, and the irritation was draining out of his face and being replaced by something closer to awe. And underneath the awe, the dawning, uncomfortable understanding of a man realizing he had nearly run off the most important teacher who would ever set foot on his range. He found his voice. Where? He started and had to clear his throat. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Earl was quiet a moment. Long time ago, he said. Different country. And he reached for the trays. He never got the chance to pick them up, because a voice from the edge of the range said, My God, it's you. And every head turned, because that voice belonged to Sergeant Major Aaron Holloway, 30 years in the Corps, the most senior enlisted man on the entire base, a man who outranked Cole Dolan by a country mile and was not in the habit of being stunned by anything. He had been walking the line on an inspection, and he had stopped 20 feet back. He was staring at the old cook like he had seen a photograph step out of a frame. He came forward slowly. I've seen your face, he said. Bah. There's a photo of you in the heritage room at the Scout Sniper School. Black and white, Hill 55, southwest of Darn, 1968. His voice had gone rough. Marines. Do you have any idea who you've been taking your breakfast from? Nobody moved. This man, Holloway said, was a Marine Scout sniper with the 1st Marine Division, 2 tours in the Arizona Territory, in the worst of it. The record they keep on him at the school is one of the reasons that school teaches the way it teaches. The wind formula he just gave you, hold for hold, word for word, Marines, that is the curriculum. You weren't getting a tip from the cook, you were getting it from the source. He stopped in front of Earl and he did something a sergeant major almost never does in front of junior Marines. He came to attention. "It's an honour, Staff Sergeant Mercer. We thought you'd passed years ago. Nobody knew where you went." And Earl Mercer, the cook, the legend, the man in the apron, looked down at the trays and said, very quietly, "I went to the kitchen. That was the surface of it. But there was a deeper thing underneath, and Earl was the only one who knew it was about to surface, because Earl was the one who had heard the name." He turned slowly, and he looked at the sweating kid on the end of the line. He looked at the name tape, Prut. And his voice, when it came, was not the cook's voice, and not the sniper's voice. It was an old man's voice, and it was shaking. "Son," he said, "what was your grandfather's name?" The kid blinked. "Daniel, sir. Danny Pruitt. He died in Vietnam before my dad was even born." "I never—" He stopped because the old man had closed his eyes. If you have ever lost someone and spent the rest of your life looking for them in strangers' faces, type "still" sharp in the comments, because what this old man said next is the reason he put the rifle down for 50 years. "Lance Corporal Danny Pruitt was my spotter," Earl said. "He was 19 years old, and he was the best set of eyes I ever worked behind. He called my wind for 200 days in country, and he never called it wrong. He had a picture of a girl back home he was going to marry, and he used to tell me he had a baby coming he was never going to get to be late for." Earl opened his eyes, and they were wet, and they were fixed on the boy. "We were on a hill in the Arizona, and the wind came up wrong, and I had a shot, and I took it, and while I was on the gun, a round came back the other way. It found him, and it didn't find me. He died calling my wind." The last number that boy ever spoke out loud was a wind call, meant to keep me alive. He looked at his own hands. "I came home, and I couldn't pick up a rifle again. Not for sport, not for anything. The math that kept me breathing was the same math that didn't keep him. So I asked to be put somewhere I could still take care of Marines without ever doing that math again. I asked for the kitchen. I've been feeding other people's sons for 50 years because I couldn't save mine." He looked back at the boy. "And then this morning, I'm carrying trays past a rifle range, and I hear a sergeant yell your name into the wind." The kid was crying. Half the line was crying. Col Dolan, the instructor who, an hour ago, had been ready to shoo this man behind the cones, was standing at rigid attention, with tears cutting down through the dust on his own face. And when Earl finally looked at him, Dolan didn't say a word. He just brought his hand up, slow and trembling, into a salute and held it. And Earl, who had spent 50 years making sure no one ever saw him, returned it. What happened on that base after did not happen all at once, the way it does in movies. It happened the slow, real way. The Scout Sniper School sent 2 officers to sit with Earl and write down everything he remembered, because some of it had never been recorded anywhere but in his head. Col Dolan started bringing his classes through the chow hall on the first day of every cycle and introducing them to the man on the serving line by his rank, so that not one more Marine would take a tray from those hands without knowing what they had done. And young Pruitt, Danny's grandson, started coming early before the sun to help in the kitchen, and the 2 of them would stand at the steel counter in the grey light, and the old man would tell the boy about the grandfather he never met, one small true story at a time, until the kid knew the sound of a laugh he'd never heard. Because that is the thing the uniform can hide, and the wind can't. Worth doesn't announce itself. The most dangerous man on that range was the one nobody looked at twice. The deepest well of knowledge on that whole base was wearing an apron and answering to a first name. And the lesson those 8 Marines carried off the line that day was not really about doping the wind. It was that the quiet man in the corner, the one you've decided has nothing left to give, may be carrying more than you will ever earn the right to ask about, and that the highest form of service some men can find is to keep taking care of you long after they've stopped being able to tell you who they are. Earl Mercer still works the line. He still comes in before the sun. And every morning, a Marine named Pruitt takes a tray from his hands, and the old man holds on just a half-second longer than he needs to before he lets it go. If you believe the people who served quietly deserve to be seen, if you believe the man with the tray might be the man who once held the line, then subscribe and stay with this channel, because we are here to make sure the wind never carries their names away. Type SDAD one more time below if you'd have saluted to.